There we go. I think we're good if this is on. Yeah. Okay, good evening. It's 7 o'clock. We have a quorum, so I'll call this meeting of council to order. Welcome to everyone in the gallery tonight and those watching at home. Just a reminder for those in the room and watching at home that we are broadcasting this live and for future viewing on YouTube. So I'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered here today in Unama'ki, the land of the fog, a part of Mi'kma'ki, the unceded traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people since time immemorial. We honor and thank the Mi'kmaq for sharing their land and home with us. So the next item, I'd ask that you stand if you're able for the playing of O Canada.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us come. Our land, glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
I'll ask the clerk to take the roll call of councillors.
District 1, Councillor Sean Sampson.
Present.
District 2, Warden Lois Landry.
Present.
District 3, Councillor Brian Marchand.
Present.
District 4, Councillor Amanda Mumbercat.
Present.
District 5, Deputy Warden Brent Sampson.
Present.
Thank you. You have an item agenda in front of you that was circulated last week. Are there any additions to the agenda as circulated? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Mumbercat. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marchand. All those in favor? You have to press your button again. Oh, shoot. No, it's on. Yeah. Oh, okay, right. Moved by Councillor Mumbercat, seconded by Councillor Marchand to adopt the agenda as circulated. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. The next item on the agenda is review of minutes. We have several to get through tonight. The first is from the regular council meeting held on September 23rd, 2024. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes as circulated?
Yeah, I just have a question. On page 7, there's a grant for the Seniors Take Action, and it says it's in the amount of $9,400. So I'm just wondering, is that what the actual grant was? Because the addition is $6,400 down below. So is it that we didn't give them all the money they requested, or is it just a typo error? We weren't here for that meeting, but
What page is that on?
page 7 of the 120.
Oh, 7 of 1.
I can provide some clarification. Councillor Marchand, that's correct. The request was in the amount of $9,400, and what we did was we funded $6,400 to be allocated as per the committee report, but also further move that staff explore options to provide in kind to get them to the point where they would be able to carry out the work. So that's where we landed.
So no error or omission on that point. So hearing none other, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll move to accept the minutes.
Can I have a seconder?
I'll second that motion.
Moved by Deputy Warden Brent Sampson, seconded by Councillor Sean Sampson to adopt the minutes of September 23rd as circulated. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Second item is the special council meeting held on October 15th, 2024. So that's page 17 of your 142. Are there any errors or omissions to these minutes as circulated?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Moved by Councillor Mumbercat to approve the minutes as presented. Any seconder?
I'll second that.
Moved by Councillor Mumbercat, seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson to adopt the minutes of October 30th as circulated. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Final set of minutes is from the organizational meeting of Council held on October 30th, 2024. Any errors or omissions to the minutes as circulated? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Can I have a seconder? Moved by Councillor Sean Sampson and seconded by Councillor Brian Marchand to adopt the minutes of October 30th as circulated. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. We'll now open up for a 10-minute, so I'm on item 7 on the agenda. We'll open up for 10-minute question period. We'll take questions from the gallery or by phone. For folks watching at home, you can call 902-226-9885. There is a slight delay, as we know, so we'll listen for a second to see if there's any ringing. Sorry, go ahead.
We have it there, and it says restricted to items on the committee reports, yet the committee reports are coming after that. The question period.
So we'll ask Councillor Mumbercat's happy to answer.
Thank you, Warden. So that's correct, Councillor Marchand. So it had come to our attention that we were offering a question period following the acceptance of committee of the whole reports, which didn't offer the public any time to ask questions about the committee of the whole decisions, I guess, or deliberations before council did the approval. And actually, I think it was Jermaine that had suggested that to us, Ms. McDonald here in the gallery this evening. So we enacted that to ensure that the members of the public would have an opportunity to ask those questions in advance. It's also why we began to publish the full agenda package so that members of the public would have content upon which to base their questions.
Does that answer your question? Great. So once again, if residents at home would like to call 902-226-9885, while we're waiting for the delay in that, if there are any members of the gallery who have any questions, and reminder that question period in this instance is restricted to committee reports, as we just mentioned. So we'll just wait because we last time realized how long the delay is there. Sound long enough, do you think? Shelley, long enough? Yeah. Just when I tried this last week, we got a phone call, but I'm going to try and say that we had no questions from the phone lines. So we're going to move on to item number 8 on your agenda, which is committee reports. For those of you following along, committee of the whole report is first, and that is at page 22 of your very lengthy package. And so I will turn it over to Deputy Warden Sampson for the committee of the whole report.
Committee of the whole report, November 2024. The committee met on November 12th, 2024. The committee discussed communications related to the municipal election. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to refer the Strategic Communications Plan to Bylaw and Policy Committee for the purpose of incorporating communications related to the municipal election.
There's a motion on the floor. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat, that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to refer the Strategic Communications Plan to the Bylaw and Policy Committee for the purpose of incorporating communications around this election. Question? All those in favor? Those opposed?
You say this election? For election.
Related to the municipal election, is the way it was worded. Yep. Councillor, Deputy Warden, sorry.
The committee discussed the Good Neighbor Project proposal. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to refer the Good Neighbor Project proposal to staff for further investigation.
Motion?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Sampson. Question? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
The committee discussed the members of Council ABCC appointments. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to approve the committee matrix with the changes as discussed. Committee matrix is attached in the package.
Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson, seconded by Councillor Mumbercat to approve the committee matrix with the changes that are included in the attached matrix. Question on the motion, no discussion. So all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
The committee discussed the low income tax exemption program policy. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to extend the deadline for applications to the low income tax exemption program policy to February 28th, 2025 for this fiscal year only.
Motion on the floor. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marchand. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
The committee discussed the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 150 grant request for the Type 1 infrastructure grant funds in the amount of $5,000. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to approve the grant request from the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 150 for the Type 1 infrastructure grant funds in the amount of $5,000, pending the submission of their balance sheet, and further move that the funds be allocated as follows: $1,000 from District 1 funds, $1,000 from District 2 funds, and $3,000 from the regional funds.
Motion on the floor. Can I have a seconder? I'll second. Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Mumbercat?
Thanks, Warden. So, yeah, I guess from, and I had sent a little note through as well today, just want to make sure that maybe when we get those grant requests, if we make sure we have the full package, I think the balance sheet would have raised some additional questions from councillors. Like I said, it's not going to sway my support for the project, but it would have probably prompted some additional questions that I think maybe, we would have had a chance to discuss. But no, fully supportive, and I just wanted to kind of make that note. Thank you.
Yeah, I think no good deed goes unpunished, but I think it's important for us to have every bit of the information before we discuss those in council. So I think that's a valid concern. So any other discussion on that motion?
I was just wondering what kind of questions would it bring up? We know the numbers are there now, so if we're going to support it now, we would have probably supported it even having it. So, but it definitely was alarming to see, to have that information and still, provide this grant. But it is a good cause for sure.
Yes, I think that in our real desire to see this project, the emergency shelter with the showers that we don't have in the rest of the county. I think that was something we were very taken with, but I think it is just important for us to be mindful in the future to make sure that everything is in place. So it's a lesson for all of us. So there is a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Marchand, Member Kett?
Thank you, Warden. So yeah, I mean, I guess some of the questions that would have prompted me was it looked like a fairly healthy balance sheet. Are there funds there restricted? Are there unrestricted? These are the kinds of questions that we had started to ask other nonprofits when they would come in that had, what appeared to be healthy balance sheets, but actually, in fact, oftentimes were very restricted in what they were able to use the funds for. And again, just also kind of wanted to reiterate that sort of overall county approach to understanding how much we're going to be investing in emergency shelters and where those will be to differentiate them from the comfort stations, which I think we've all become very familiar with. So, yeah, I'm hoping we can have some additional conversation around our county-wide strategy on the issue of shelters. So, thank you.
Yes, I agree, and I think it's important also for us to know what is an emergency shelter requirement, and if there are times where groups are going over and above that, and what that means for the county. So I think it is worth having all the information. Again, there is a motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion? Questions called. Okay, questions called. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Those opposed? The motion is carried.
The committee discussed the Acadiaville Community Centre Society grant request for the Type 2 Startup Activity Grant Funds in the amount of $500. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to approve the grant request from the Acadiaville Community Centre Society for the Type 2 Startup Activity Grant Funds in the amount of $500 and be allocated from District 2 funds.
Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson and seconded by Councillor Marchand to approve the grant request from Acadiaville Community Centre. All those in favour? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
The committee discussed the Ile Royale ATV Club's request for a letter of support. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to have the Warden prepare a non-monetary letter of support for the Ile Royale ATV Club regarding the Capelin Cove Wilderness Area as outlined in the request.
Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson, seconded by Councillor Marchand, to have a non-monetary letter of support for the Ile Royale ATV Club regarding Capelin Cove. Discussion? All those in favour? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
The committee discussed the Dr. Kingston Memorial Community Health Centre's request for letters of support. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to have the Warden prepare letters of support for the Dr. Kingston Memorial Community Health Centre for their application to the Community Foundation of Nova Scotia Visions Fund grant and the Age-Friendly Communities Grant Program as outlined in the request.
Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marchand. Question? Do you have something to say? Or that, okay. Okay. So there's a motion on the floor. All those in favour of recommending that letters of support go for Kingston Memorial Health Centre?
I just had a comment. In this one, I noticed you didn't put non-monetary. Are they aware, or are we potentially going to be supporting them with some funds in the future?
To be fair, the motion didn't say that, right? So I specifically included, while we cannot, a phrase that spoke about it, it was not specifically part of the motion in this instance. Yeah, so. Question? Okay, all those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Or raise your hand. Contrary-minded. Motion is carried.
The committee discussed contact information. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to have staff investigate the use of generic email addresses and landline phone numbers for members of Council.
Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson, seconded by Councillor Marchand to investigate generic email addresses and landline phone numbers. All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Some discussion on that, Councillor Mumbercat?
Thank you, Warden. So just wanted to kind of put it on the record that I would agree with, I love the idea of like the landline phone numbers and forwarding, because I think that would create some consistency. But I wouldn't be in favor of the generic email address, because I think part of, part of working with our constituents is having a personal approach with them. And also I think that, as we move from one council to another council, responsible, it would be the responsibility of the new councillor to kind of get up to speed. And I'm just not fully loving the idea of sharing generic email. Another thing is that sometimes, a person, even though I know all of our information is FOIP-oppable, but sometimes members of the public will email the councillor information that they wouldn't typically necessarily want to be public or for anybody else to know. And I just would like to protect the privacy of our constituents that way. I don't know if there's another way around it, because that idea of sharing an email inbox, or if we're just talking about an email address forward. There's just some question marks for me around that, and maybe it's part of the investigation, but I just wanted to kind of put a little bit of concern on the record there. So.
Sure. So I think the motion is to have staff investigate the use. So I think we can investigate that and consider that as in reference to what they tell us. But just a point of clarification, I think FOIPOP, if anybody sends anything to an @Richmond County email, every instance, whether it went to Lois.Landry or absolutely. Yeah. So the motion is to recommend the council investigate the use of these. Sorry, yes, that's staff. Investigate the use of generic email addresses. So there is a motion on the floor. Call for a question. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
This concludes the Committee of the Whole report for the month of November 2024, and I move its adoption.
Moved by Councillor Marchand and seconded by, Deputy Brent Sampson, and seconded by Councillor Marchand, that the Committee of the Whole report for the month of November be adopted. Just a comment. And I guess maybe just throw this out for a question. After the meeting last week, particularly since the folks who were looking for letters of recommendation had waited a good amount of time because of the election, I wrote those already. They're attached in the money. Is there any concern about wanting us to wait until after the council meeting when this is forwarded? Because these folks were waiting for letters for a long time, right? So, and in one case, the actual application had passed, and I was sending it with the hopes that they would be allowed to consider. So is there any concern, or would you like to give direction to the warden around whether we wait for council meeting to approve that these letters be written?
I would say it's up to you if you want. I mean, we had that discussion, you and I expressed potential concerns, but if it's non-monetary, go ahead and give it to them, especially for ones, like you say, that are, restricted time-wise.
Thanks. I would agree with Councillor Marchand. I would go so far as to say for non-monetary, and if it's aligning with our strategic plan, and I know I would trust your judgment on that, I would question whether it needs to come to a committee of the whole or council. I think anything monetary will have to, but if it's non-monetary, I would be in favor of, giving you, rein to write those letters, because a lot of times grant deadlines sneak up on people, and I know that, I know they're published in advance, but we have a lot of volunteers trying to juggle a lot of things right now. And so, if they realize 2 days before the deadline, and then our council meeting, even committee of the whole, is not for another 2 weeks, we could be, creating an issue for them. So anyway, that would be my kind of opinion there. Thank you, Warden.
Yeah, just for members of the public, there was discussion among councillors about in these particular instances where this group of folks had been kind of waiting and wanted letters to support big grant applications that they were making, but we didn't seem to have consensus. But what I'll take from this conversation is that so long as we discuss it at least one meeting, then we certainly can go ahead, and I don't need to wait until the council meeting. Okay. So there's a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion? Okay. Call for a question. All those in favor of adopting the Committee of the Whole report for the month of November, please say so. Those opposed? Motion is carried. So we'll now move on, for those following along, it's page 49 of our package, the Bylaw and Policy Committee report for November of 2024. I'll again turn it over to Deputy Warden Brent Sampson.
I've got page 27. I don't know if that's any different than, okay. The committee met, Bylaw Policy Committee report November 2024. The committee met on November 12th, 2024. The committee discussed the new Code of Conduct policy as prescribed by the province. I move that the Bylaw Policy Committee recommend to Council to adopt the new Code of Conduct for elected officials as mandated by the province by the following resolution. Whereas the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing for the province of Nova Scotia has made the Code of Conduct for municipal elected officials regulations, NS Regulations 220/2024, the regulations, and whereas municipalities are required to adopt the model Code of Conduct prescribed by the regulations on or before December 19th, 2024, pursuant to Section 4(1) of the regulations and Section 23A of the Municipal Government Act. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of the County of Richmond hereby adopt the model Code of Conduct as set forth in Schedule A to the regulations, which shall be titled the Code of Conduct for Elected Officials of the Municipality of the County of Richmond.
So that's a motion within the Bylaw Policy Committee report. So there's a motion. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. Is there any question on that motion? Discussion? Councillor Mumbercat?
Thank you, Warden. So just to reiterate a couple of the things we discussed at Bylaw and Policy for members of the public who are watching this evening especially, we did talk about just feedback we had received, I think, through our municipal orientation, Warden, and just in reviewing it, that there could potentially be an opportunity to put in an appeal process with the council member who's the subject of the complaint at the beginning of the investigation, to give them the ability to provide some input or context to the process of somebody determining if a complaint needs to be fully investigated. There was also, some discussion about the sanctions being very punitive in nature and less sort of restorative or rehabilitative. The fast tracking of training. He had also talked a little bit about either a duty to report, and I know there were some concerns expressed around that, but, where does the code talk about the responsibility of fellow councillors or staff to kind of report when they see something gone awry? Although that could be complicated. So I'm not sure if any of that could be communicated back to the province, that they explore some additional items in that regard, just to put our, if council was interested, to put our desires on the record, that we would be interested in having, maybe even it's in having an additional conversation with municipal affairs to talk about what we see as some of the drawbacks of it, that we could potentially provide some input to help resolve. I don't know, I just, that's kind of where my head was at with the discussion at Bylaw and Policy, and wanted to offer it here as well. I do think it's going to be a living document, right? As it gets applied, people are going to learn and tweak accordingly, so.
So Councillor Marbuket and I attended council orientation, and there was roundtable discussion. And in fact, the discussion when Councillor Marbuket went around and when I went around wasn't even the same. So there's a lot of newness around here. So at this point, at this juncture, councils are required to adopt this as a minimum standard by December 19th. We chose to do it tonight for fear of a weather event before at our December meeting. So there's a motion on the floor now to adopt as we are required to through the regulations. I'm looking to perhaps vote on that, get that put aside, and then if we want to address another motion following that, if we'd like to bring another motion to the floor, or if we'd like to bring it up at a subsequent council meeting. Okay, so perhaps we can revisit this at a subsequent council meeting. Many of us are going to the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities event. Believe there's a session on this, so perhaps we can bring that back at some point. Okay. So at this point, there's a motion on the floor to that the municipality of the County of Richmond hereby adopt the Model Code of Conduct as set forth in Schedule A to the regulations, which shall be titled the Code of Conduct for Elected Officials of the Municipality of the County of Richmond. So we have a motion moved by Deputy Warden Sampson and seconded by Councillor Marbuket. Do we have any other discussion on that? Okay, so I'll call for a question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, that motion is carried.
This concludes the Bylaw Policy Committee report for November 2024, and I move its adoption.
Deputy Warden Sampson has moved the adoption of the Bylaw and Policy Committee report. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Sampson. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. So, page 67. So the next item on the agenda, 9.0, is second reading approval. And just for clarification, there are two separate items under this item. So it is A, amendment to the Richmond subdivision bylaw. So earlier this evening, a public hearing was held following the first reading approval of this amendment. We heard from staff as well as written and verbal submissions from the public, and those written submissions were read for the record. So I'm open to discussion on this amendment or a motion that council gives second reading approval.
Thank you, Warden. As for the amendment to the subdivision bylaw, I have a lot of concerns of taking out, I don't have a concern so much for taking out surveyed. I think that's a good idea, so it'll save the taxpayer money, but I do have concerns with not having an easement clearly described. And for the listening public that do own pieces of land that, have the burden of having an easement, I think they need to get it clearly addressed before an issue does come forward. For those of you that do have a property and are giving an easement to someone, I think they as well need to be very clear about this, because they could see themselves in the future with someone subdividing a land and an easement that they think that was maybe to the left of their land that could be right through their driveway if they don't clearly describe it, because we see an example that was presented to us by a constituent where the easement, a surveyor gets involved, the EDPC gets involved, and the easement is not what initially was probably stated back 50 plus years ago. So I think for the public that do have easements, get them cleared up before you do run into an issue. For myself, both of these, I was asking the lady that was here from EDPC just about item 2 in reference to landlocked properties. I think we need further discussion on this, just even for myself. Do we totally remove the need for someone to get an easement on a property to be able to subdivide? Or do we have it clearly described, or do we have it surveyed? I think more discussion definitely needs to be had, just to protect the public with this. We have it at PAC with, there will be 2 members of the public on our committee. I'm not, you know, in favor of supporting this right now because I think more discussion needs to be had with the director of planning or somebody from planning just to get maybe examples of people that have had issues with this, or just so that we can hopefully do this in the best interest of everybody involved with them, because I do see, you know, there could be many issues with these easements, for sure. Thank you, Warden, and I won't be supporting this.
Any other initial discussions? Initial? Hearing none, I'll await, see if there is a motion.
I'll make a motion for second reading.
There's a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Moved by Deputy Warden Brent Sampson, seconded by Councillor Mumbercat, that council gives second reading approval for the amendments to the Richmond subdivision bylaw as presented. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of council giving second reading approval to the amendments to the Richmond subdivision bylaw as presented, signify by saying aye. Those opposed? That motion does. So clerk,
You have 3 nays.
3 nays.
Yeah, it doesn't go.
Good. Okay. The next issue is amendment to the West Richmond, Central Richmond, St. Peters, Isle Madame, and Richmond County land use bylaws. And just some clarification here. I discussed this with the clerk earlier, and although during our public hearing we treated this as one conversation, we actually require a separate motion for each of the land use bylaws. So it is exactly the same amendment, but because they are separate bylaws, we require each, should they be moved, we require that each have their own separate motion. So I'll ask if there's any initial discussion, particularly since we're going to have potentially several. Councillor Marchand? It went off and came. Try again.
Okay. The concerns expressed by the public in reference to the variance and people getting notified, zoning is sold, zoning and variances. You know, I guess for zoning, it's sold on the issue of not having a pig farm next to you. Well, if someone was wanting to rezone and I was the person next, I would want to be notified. And I wouldn't just want that the letter was sent. So just like a variance, if somebody was getting a variance that could affect the use of my property, I would like to know. But it leads back to the question of, are we doing things wrong that we need to give so many variances out? Maybe we need to revisit all of the rules that we have in place and to minimize variances. But I think for us as a municipality or the Planning Commission, having it sent out by registered mail would definitely ensure that they've sent something out. I don't know where they're getting the addresses. Are the addresses coming from the tax bill? Is it something that they get on property online? I don't know where they get them, but I did hear a case as well that someone didn't get it for many, many days. So was it sent out, or was it sent out to the wrong address? I don't know. But I think we need to ensure that at the minimum, they are sent out through registered mail so that we know something was sent. So I won't be supporting this change as well.
Comments, concerns?
I'll move to give it second readings. I think we would probably be having these discussions once we've moved and seconded it, you know what I mean, rather than prior, yeah.
Yeah, in this instance, yeah, okay. So we have a motion to give second reading, if I can put words in your mouth, to give second reading approval to the West Richmond land use bylaw as presented. And we'll have to go through each of these as its own entity. Do we have a seconder? Seconded, so moved by Deputy Warden Brent Sampson and seconded by Councillor Mumbercat, that we give second reading approval to the West Richmond land use bylaw as presented. So is there discussion on the motion aside from what we've heard?
Yeah, no, the only thing I'd like to add to that is just, so what it is here is adding those 7 days to the notice. You know, whether or not we wanted to go down the route of registered mail, it would be a whole separate, like, we have gone through that, but it's a new council, so there might be a different appetite for it. You know, it's up to anybody around this table whether they want to support this or not. I think the motion we have in front of us, though, does improve the ability for somebody to be able to get notice. Does it improve it as far as some people may like to see? Maybe not, and maybe that's a whole other discussion. But I kind of feel like turning this down tonight is sort of pitting the good against the perfect, if you're not satisfied with it.
So if I'm understanding your argument correctly, this actually makes the bylaw more stringent, and a question about registered mail could be brought up at another time. And so we're not removing registered mail. We are in fact increasing the length of time from 14 to 21 days, and that's the only change of substance in here. Okay, so we have any other discussion?
Yeah. It does bring it from 14 to 21 days, but if someone doesn't get the letter, doesn't matter how many days we give them. So, yeah, we can approve it tonight, but I definitely would want to have further discussion as to how this is sent. The extra 7 days, if someone doesn't get it, doesn't really matter. And it is deemed sent after 3 days. So I don't know if the 21 days starts then or if it's the day they send it. So is it 21 after the third day?
Yeah, and either way, this adds 7 to it. You know what I mean? Regardless. Yeah, regardless, this is making it more accessible for people. Yeah.
I just think if we support it now, I hope that it wouldn't die. So I won't be supporting it. And I would like to make the 2 changes. Give people extra time. Problem with extra time, it slows down development, but I think the neighbors need to know. If they definitely, at all costs, know, whether it's a phone call, an email, or registered mail, the 14 days is probably enough. When someone's going to get it, I think they're going to reply fairly quick. Thank you, Warden.
So I'm clear. Are you moving an amendment to the motion to include registered mail? I just want to be clear about what you just moved.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can do that, but if people are...
I don't believe we'd be able to do that just because it would have to go back. If it was a change, it would have to go back to first reading, public hearing, and so on. Yeah.
So you're requesting just a friendly audience on this at a future time?
I think I can make amendments providing that the mover is okay with me making that amendment, but if he or she is not, then I can't make it. Maybe the...
Deputy Warden?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it would be proper to make an amendment to something at second reading after the public hearing. But I wouldn't be comfortable with it just because I don't feel like we'd be going through the process properly, but I could be incorrect. I think if we wanted to add this in the future, it's definitely a kind of conversation can be had at PAC.
So I believe the motion on the floor is to make the bylaw more restrictive in that we are adding 7 days from 14 to 21. I think an amendment to this amendment is premature, given that that's not what we publicized at the public hearing. So I'm comfortable looking at this on a future day around the additional restrictions for example, registered mail, but I think that would go through a different process. We didn't have registered mail before. We're not getting rid of registered mail. Deputy or Councillor Marquette?
Thank you, Warden. So what we could do is following the vote on this motion, somebody could make a motion to refer the issue of registered mail back to the PAC, and then it could go, we could take care of that motion in this meeting tonight, so then we know that it's on the PAC agenda. We'll have, new members of council there, but also potentially new members of the public, so it could be a whole different discussion.
So I think that's reasonable. So what we'll do is we'll vote on the amendment as it is moved by Deputy Warden Sampson and Councillor Mumbercat. And then following each of these, I would be open to a reference back to PAC. Yes? Okay.
Okay, so we're just voting then on the amendment that's in this package to change from 14 to 21 days. That's all. And you're okay with us making a motion to send it back? Okay. Okay with me.
You can make any motion. You can make the motion. It may not, but we're not at that point. We're at this point where we're discussing 14 to 21 days. So the motion on the floor is that council give second reading approval to the West Richmond land use bylaws as presented, and that presentation includes the change of 14 days to 21 days. Okay. No other discussion on that? I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the I'll say it again. All those in favor of council giving second reading approval to the West Richmond land use bylaw as presented, please signify by saying aye. 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 Those opposed? Opposed. So we'll record that as 3-4 and 2 against. So I'm going to ask for subsequent the remaining, one at a time, motions for council to give second reading approval, in this instance, to the Central Richmond land use bylaws as presented.
I'll make that motion. West Richmond.
Each of these, West Richmond, Central Richmond, Isle Madame, St. Peters, Richmond County. Yes. Yeah. No, and because I clarified with the clerk before, we did the public hearing that way because in essence it is the same situation, but for the purpose of bylaw amendments, because they are different bylaws, they have to be done separately. So there is a motion on the floor, which was moved by Deputy Warden Sampson, to give second reading approval to the Central Richmond land use bylaw. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. Do we have any new discussion on this matter? All those in favor of the motion, the council gives second reading approval to the Central Richmond land use bylaw, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? I'm opposed. Great. 1 or 2? I thought I saw your hand go up for yes.
Yeah, so does this include?
It's the second one.
Yeah, so then
So your vote is? Nay. Great. So we have 3 in favor of the Central Richmond and 2 opposed. So I'll call for a motion for the council gives second reading approval for the Isle Madame land use bylaw as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mumbercat, that council gives second reading approval for the Isle Madame land use bylaws as presented. Any new discussion? None. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? So the vote is 3-2. Looking now for council to give second reading approval for the St. Peter's land use bylaws as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Warden Sampson, seconded by Councillor Mumbercat to approve, for second reading approval for the St. Peter's land use bylaws as presented. Any new discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? 2 votes no, 3 votes yes. And finally, we're looking for council to give second reading approval for the Richmond County Land Use Bylaw as presented. I have a mover.
I'll move that.
Seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson. Sorry, moved by Deputy Warden Sampson, seconded by Councillor Mumbercat. Do we have any new discussion on that motion? We are calling for council to give second reading approval for the Richmond County Land Use Bylaw as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried 3-2. Now, would anyone have anything more to say under land use bylaws?
I'll make a motion to refer the issue of registered mail back to the Planning Advisory Committee.
And I'll second that.
So
Oh, I forgot to press my button.
Councillor, sorry. So moved by Councillor Mumbercat to refer the matter of registered mail back to the Planning Advisory Committee, seconded by Councillor Mershon. Is there any additional discussion on that matter? Okay, I'll call for question. All those in favor of all those in favor of referring this back to the PAC, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Okay, so next item is new business. So there is a proclamation request of us, International Day of Persons with Disabilities, on December 3rd, 2024. Whereas December 3rd is recognized globally by the United Nations as International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and whereas Canada is a signatory to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, and 2 out of 5 Nova Scotians live with a disability, and whereas Nova Scotia has proclaimed the Accessibility Act that recognizes accessibility as a human right and set a goal of accessible province by 2030, and whereas International Day of Persons with Disabilities promotes an understanding of disability issues and the importance of equal access for Nova Scotians with disabilities in all aspects of society, and whereas through public awareness, community partnerships, and municipal accessibility initiatives, this day aims to foster an environment of equal participation of individuals with disabilities within the municipality of the County of Richmond. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Warden Lois Landry, on behalf of Richmond County Municipal Council, do hereby proclaim December 3rd, 2024 as International Day for Persons with Disabilities in the municipality of the County of Richmond. So I'm looking for a motion to approve this proclamation for December 3rd as International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So moved by Councillor Mershon. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Sampson to approve the proclamation that December 3rd be International Day of Persons with Disabilities in Richmond County. Do I have any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Item 11 is warden regarding appointment of an investigator for the complaint and investigation process under the new code of conduct for elected officials as prescribed by the province. And in our meeting notes to the public, it just says verbal, so I just want to give a little bit of clarification here. So earlier this evening, we adopted the new code of conduct for elected officials. Another part of this process under the regulations is that municipalities must appoint an investigator for the complaint and investigation process under this code. So the CAO, so this is a part of the regulations. So the CAO has been in touch with Noah Landry from MLAW who is our solicitor, who has agreed to fill the role as investigator as prescribed by the province. So I'm looking for a motion to appoint Noah Landry of EMM Law as the investigator for the complaint and investigation under the Code of Conduct for elected officials of the Municipality of the County of Richmond.
Can I ask a question before we make the motion? Do we have to do this, or was the province going to be doing this?
We are required under the regulations.
So moved then.
Moved by Councillor Marchand. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Sean Sampson. Do you have any discussion on the motion? Councillor Membercap?
This is new, new process for us, and I know that we are required to do this. I don't feel like I have any information as to why Mr. Landry would have been selected, other than I know that we do business with that firm and they've done great work for us. But I would kind of like to know, I'd like to see what are the skill sets, what are the requirements, and then who are the potential candidates. A little bit more of a transparent, I guess, process around that rather than just receiving a recommendation. So I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I think Mr. Landry's not qualified. I just simply don't know. So I'm just wondering if we could get, before we, go down this road, could we get a little bit more information?
Yeah, I have some additional concerns, and that is some of the investigative processes would involve, simple collecting of evidence, which we would be paying a solicitor hundreds of dollars to do. So there are people who are HR consultants who, when you look at the criteria, must have experience with conducting investigations and that kind of thing. So there are people who have done that for HR companies, who are HR consultants, whose hourly rate might be less. I also don't know, and this is new, so I may be entirely wrong on this, but our solicitor works for us, and I'm not confident that there wouldn't be a time where our solicitor filling this role wouldn't be a dual relationship somehow. So I'm strictly speculating on that, but in the absence of conversation about that, I also have some concerns.
Thank you, Warden. I totally agree. I am wondering, though, with the December 19th deadline, if we could make a friendly amendment to have this as a temporary appointment until such time as we could do a little more investigation. On how we could best execute this, on how we could best execute this without costing the taxpayers an exorbitant amount of money for a service that could potentially be procured a lot less expensively. So, I'd be in favor with that, but just in terms of just appointing that person right now for the long run, I wouldn't be in favor. Although I do want to underscore again that I really appreciate the good work EMM Law has done for us. So, I would just leave it at that. Yeah.
Councillor or Deputy Warden Sampson?
Yeah, I can understand. I think I'd like a bit more information maybe from the CAO on this, but I don't know that we have to worry about the deadline too much on it, really, because I'm not sure what they're going to do if we don't meet it. We're in the process of doing it. They can't send us to bed early. It's not, we haven't had much time to deal with this, so I think I'd rather, if it's a slight delay, I'd rather that we do it right.
Councillor Marshall?
Who did the recommendation come from? I thought it was coming from you. Obviously not.
It's coming from the CAO, who unfortunately has had a family emergency and can't be with us this evening. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is, although we were really concerned about getting this motion through on today, November 25th, we do have a council meeting scheduled on December 16th. So we do have another meeting, and we were concerned about a snow event, but I think to Deputy Warden Sampson's point, we're we would still have some wiggle room in there, and we do certainly have that meeting in between. Is there any other? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Warden. I appreciate your patience. So I would agree. I am just kind of like, as I'm working this through in my mind, though, should a member of the public register a complaint or anybody register a complaint against any of us, in the meantime, we would have no real mechanism to deal with it because we don't have an investigator in place. So I would be, I guess, making a motion to make this a temporary assignment until such time as we have more information, just so that we're not empty-handed. I'd be in favor of that, so I would suggest that as a friendly amendment, but
I did.
okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Marshall. I may have cut you off. Try again. Your mic. Your mic. Sorry, I cut you off.
At any point, we can change it anyway.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't have to make it temporary. We can leave the motion as it stands. We'll recommend, but we could change it at any time when we gather more information, or if there's someone else that we have in mind. So I'm okay with leaving it stand, but if you do want to put temporary in there, Councillor Mumbricket, I mean, we don't mind having it as, we'll recommend no as a temporary to fill this role.
And forgive me, is there did somebody make a motion yet? Councillor Mershon seconded. So I believe what we need is a motion to amend the motion to include the word interim or temporary. We vote on that, and then we go back and we vote on the amended, should we choose that, motion. Okay, just to make sure that we've got our ducks in a row.
I'll make a motion to make a friendly amendment to the previously stated motion to add the word interim to it.
So there is a motion on the floor now to amend the motion about the appointment of the investigator to include the word, was it, I'm sorry, temporary? Interim. On that amendment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? So we'll go back now to the motion on the floor, which is to the amended motion, which is to appoint, to have an interim appointment of Noah Landry as from EMM Law as the investigator for the complaint and investigation under the Code of Conduct for Elected Officials from the Municipality of the County of Richmond. And that was moved by Brian Marchand, seconded by Councillor Sean Sampson. All those in favor of that amended motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. So correspondence, we have several items, but none of them require action. So there are several there for your information. There are the ones that were discussed last Tuesday to the Isle Royale ATV Club and two to Dr. Kingston Memorial Health Centre. In addition, so if you have any questions of those, in addition there is a piece, so is there any question on the letters that were submitted? Okay. The next is a bit of information regarding the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence. Notice this is actually, anyone can nominate anyone. And we did have a Richmond County, Diane Keogh got the award several years ago now, but I've been involved in several nominations. It's a lengthy process, but it can be from anyone. So for members of the public who have an interest in that, there is quite a lot of information there on how that works. And finally, there's an annual report from the Eastern County Regional Library for the 23-24 fiscal year, if anybody would like to peruse that. Okay. Any questions on any of those? No? So we'll look for item 13 is a review of action items. So that is from page 101 to page 142. So there's a lot of that. And for those who may be wondering why there's some different numbers, page numbers, the additional pages from the, what was it? The Royal Canadian Legion were added so that the members of the public, so I'm, That's right, the pages are different, and so for people who are looking currently under meeting packages on the municipality's website, the page numbers I've been giving are the accurate ones. Okay, so any questions on the review of action items? There were no items added to the agenda, so we will now look to a 10-minute question period. We will take questions from the gallery or by phone. For folks listening, again, this is number you can call 226-9885, slight delay, and this question period is restricted to items on the agenda that follow the committee reports. So if anyone has any questions on items that follow the committee reports from the gallery, while we wait to hear if there's any questions from the phone lines. And it is a pretty significant delay. While we're waiting for phone lines, just in case, I will let members of the gallery and members of the public know that typically council meets on the second and fourth Monday. So we have committee of the whole on the second and council meeting on the fourth Monday of the month. But for the month of December, it is typical to have that on the first and the third. So our next committee of the whole meeting will be Monday, December 2nd, and the next meeting of council will be on Monday, December 16th. Sound like enough time? Think so? Okay, so hearing no questions from the gallery or from the phone lines, there's no further business on tonight's agenda, so this meeting of council is adjourned. Thank you.